Alright, well, we've got our pieces pretty well washed up and ready to go into anodize them. And I've got four pieces. I've got the back plate from the control box, and I've got, or from the control assembly, and then I've got the little toggle, and then I've got the intermediate plate and the upper plate for the drawbar itself, or for the impact itself. So I've washed these down real good, and I'm just going to affix some aluminum rod to them so that they'll conduct current, and we'll go ahead and put them into the anodized tank. I won't show all of that, but I will show you these parts cleaned up here before I dump them in. And we're just going to stick them in, anodize them, hopefully successfully, and then we'll dye them the green that we've got here. I'm interested to see how that comes out on a sandblasted finish. I expect a little bit darker than what I got on the initial brackets that I did, where they were polished. Well, I think it doesn't take quite as well. So this is our back plate here, and our bearing surfaces I've left polished, but the extra outside surfaces while we sandblasted. There's the intermediate plate. This is our little toggle for in and out. Polish the faces around the outside. And this is our intermediate plate here. That's the way it's gonna look. And then we've got our top plate here that we've contoured and got it ready to go. So all we're going to do is affix our rod to it so that we've got good contact. Alright, well, we're about halfway through our anodizing time here. We got another half an hour or so, but anyway, this is what I did for the base plate. Now, a while back I had a suggestion that I should be using or I should look at the hammer tone finish, because it fairly closely matched the grizzly green that's on the mill itself. And I kind of dismissed that because I have used it before and wasn't real impressed. I don't think you get quite as much material out of the can, and it's a little bit brighter green, doesn't really match as well as it could, type of thing. I got to looking and I had a partial can of it left, so I went ahead and sprayed the base with it. And it's okay. You know, I'm still not in love with it. It's a brighter green. I'm going to use it on the base plate, and since I powder coated my hand wheels, I probably will go back and use this same paint, since I've still got some in the can, on those hand wheels, just because I really don't like that green that I powder coated on there. So I'll probably go back and spray them. But just wanted to show you what I had here. Like I say, I'm going to leave it and I'll use it. It sits up there on top of the mill, and but it's not a color that I'm really in love with. You know, I could buy it by the quart and mix it a little bit. Probably add a little bit of black would tone it down, or even a little brown would probably bring it back in, but I'm probably not going to screw with it. I'm probably going to utilize, for most of the things I build, the green that I've been using. It's a brighter green, but I don't think it's objectionable. So anyway, thought I'd show you that. That's part of what's going on here. And I went ahead and cleaned up the valve body and deburred this edge. I think that may have been part of the reason that it was hanging a little bit on me. So I've got that ready to go. I'm going to start working on the air system, and I discovered I didn't have the right size street L. This is the street L that I had was a different size, so it was only 1/8 inch, and whereas this is bigger. So I'll have to get another one for that. But I've cleaned the valve body up. I polished the faces on these a little bit, deburred this edge, polished the faces on the place where it seats, and got it ready to go on once we get the backing plate powder coated and done for that. For the air system on the back of my piston, what I'm going to do is I've used a T, and this is for the most part used parts that I've had, used connectors, or maybe not used, but stuff that's been kicking around in my scrap box drawers. So what I'm going to do off of this is I'm going to use 1/8 inch pipe, and since of course nobody has in stock 1/8" pipe, tees, things like that, I'll just build a little adapter for these. Actually what I'll do is I'll fit these to the top of the body assembly on the mid plate like I did on the other one, and I'm going to form them down, and I'll slide a piece of 1/4" vinyl tubing over them, and then I'll flare them is what I'll do, and that's the way I'll connect them and seal them on that. But I'm going to use that T on the back, and we'll adapt that to this 1/8" pipe, or 1/8" tubing. On the tops of the mid body, I'm going to use these little L's right here. I'm going to connect my 1/4" tube from here, and this is going to run to the back of the adapter for the valve body. To adapt our 1/8" tubing to it, I'm going to do the same thing I did on the other one. I'm going to take and drill the back of the L, and I'm just going to solder them in there, and we'll thread them on. We'll show you when we get that far, but one of the first things is going to be to drill the back of these to accept that, and then everything else is just going to be fitting it up as we assemble it. So for the air supply, I got a couple little Amazon purchases in today, and I'll throw links to both of these. One of them was just a little edge finder, little Mitutoyo 3/8 edge finder with a .20 tip on it. I've got a couple of bigger edge finders. I wanted the smaller 3/8 diameter to fit in my Albright chuck that I use on this mill. It just makes it a lot easier to set up the other edge finders, and I'm used to using the electronic edge finders on the other mills, so I haven't really worried about it that much because I don't use a standard edge finder that much. But for on this mill, for a manual mill, a lot of times I'm drilling, and for an edge finder I wanted something I could just put in my drill chuck. The other thing is for the air supply, I got a little Nanpu pneumatic air supply here, and what I got was a regulator, filter, and oiler setup for all three, and this is just going to the drawbar control. So my compressor is pretty well worn, and I get some moisture through it, especially this time of year. So I did get the little automatic water separator, so we'll see how it works. I don't know if I'm going to continue to use that with this. I don't know if I'm going to like the automatic water separator for where I'm going to mount it. I'm going to mount it up on the top of the tool tower, and I may either have to run a line down off of that down to a catch can someplace, or I don't know exactly how that's going to work out. But there again, relatively inexpensive, fairly good looking little tool. I think the mounting holes on the back are the same 2-inch spacing, just by chance that I drilled the tool tower to, so it will bolt right up to that. And you know, we may make changes along the way, but I think that'll be a nifty little option, relatively inexpensive. It's a fairly small, compact unit. Got a gauge to go with it. And these look like a modular unit. It looks like you can kind of mix and match what you've got. So if I decide I want a different setup, why I can, you know, you could take off the oiler and just use a regulator. Comes with couple little nipples and Teflon tape, and a pair of really fine-looking plastic connectors, which may actually be okay, you know, if they're just used for that. I normally would use a brass or a plated connector, but I don't know if we'll use this or not. So anyway, that's what we've got to get mounted on the tool tower. That's how we're going to plumb it in. I've got to make up an air line, a little pigtail to come off of the valve body and back up to the regulator. So we'll see that as it comes together. So here's a look at the pressure regulator. I've got oil in it. It just barely fits right there. I did have to set the mounting bracket up in the mill and open it up. It was a metric size, I'm sure. So I just ran a 1/4-inch end mill down through there. I think for right now, from the valve body, I'm going to go ahead and use the plastic fittings they've got. And on this end, I'll go ahead and fit this fitting in. We'll see if it works. If it does, fine. If it doesn't, why, that's all right too. I actually like the looks of this little unit. It's not a bad looking unit at all. We'll put a street L and a whip hose down off of that, so we're not putting a strain on the hose straight out of there. And for this little whip hose over on this side, I don't think it makes any difference for right now. We can always change it, but looks like a fairly well built modular little setup, and thought I'd show you before we actually soldered up our air fittings. This is our assembly. Now, this is anodized up, and I'll show you the controls here in a minute. This is with that green. Now, mixed emotions type of thing. When you look at it like this, this is it's kind of an OD green. It's not bad over a matted finish. On a polished surface, why it's the same as the brackets that I anodized for the digital readout when I mounted it. So, yeah, it's okay. Nothing spectacular. What I did discover about it, though, was I had heard from at least one individual that some of the dies didn't need to be heated, and I'm using Caswell dies in my anodizing setup. This bracket was actually a little bit too big to fit into my little pot that I've been heating and using for my dies, and it would have fit if I would have got the other 3 pieces done and then put this one in. But I thought while I was waiting for the other 3 pieces to color, why I just go ahead and drop this in the cold dye that I had. I've got a batch of it mixed up, and it doesn't all fit in the little kettle that I'm using for heated dyes. So I just dropped this piece in, and I can tell virtually no difference in the color between this one done in a unheated solution as opposed to the other 3 pieces that I ran through the heated solution. So this little green in particular, I'm not going to worry about heating it in the future. Anything that I do with it, I'm just going to dip. You know, sometime down the road I'll probably heat it again just to do a little comparison or a little test just to make sure that's still holding true. But for this batch of dye, like I say, I can't tell any difference at all. So anyway, what I did is we've already reassembled this and done a couple little test fits. Now the bushings are pushed back in place. This is the last time they'll go in there, and the body's mounted. So for my air fittings, what I did on top was I used just a 90 degree that will take a compression, and I'm going to run poly tube off of here to go down to the valve body. But to affix my tubing on the back, rather than use a T, what I did is I just set it up in the mill, cut a flat, and then drilled it to accept this 1/8 inch tubing, and I'm just going to soft solder it back in there. And I'm going to do that while it's all assembled, just so I can hold alignment and make sure everything will fit in, because if I tried to screw these back in with them all soldered together, why, there's no way to thread down in past each other and past everything else. So I think what I'm going to do is just leave it completely assembled like this, and see, this is a low enough heat that I don't think we'll have an issue. I'll go ahead and just solder it up right there. Now I may bend this tube a little bit just so it will clear the screw for the impact gun itself, in case I were ever to have to disassemble it. And from the other end, these are standard 1/4 inch compression fittings, but what I did is I ran a piece of poly tubing on the outside of my 1/8 inch tubing. It just fits. Went ahead and put a compression collar on there like I normally would, and on the end of the tubing itself I flared it just a little bit, so that should in theory at least hold the plastic tubing tight to the copper tubing, and the copper tubing won't be able to back out under air pressure. And I think it'll work fine. You know, it's not a big enough strain on it that I think we've got plenty of oomph there. So I'm going to go back, and I fitted these in initially and decided where I wanted my tubing to enter, and then that's how I set them up. So one of them I ended up on the corner, did a flat and drilled it. This one I just drilled it in the side. So I'm going to go ahead, set this up, and see if we can't soft solder it without burning anything up. So here's our fittings soldered in place. Goes on there there just like that. Goes into our body in the back. If we put air to it, we put air to it like this. That impact gun feels a little bit light, but we'll go ahead, hook everything up, and see how it works. This will go on here just about like that. And our top plate sits on here just like that, with our 2 screws. We've got to do something with our adjustment screws here. I don't think I want them tight. I want a little bit of float. So the bottom one will just bottom out as far down as it will go. The top one actually the top one's not even necessary really. But if we need it, we could either put a nylock, a skinny nylock on there, or we could drill it and put a set screw in it. So from the other side it looks like this. This would be our view from the back side of the mill. And our air hoses will come off here and go down the side. And they are going to fit. We still got to cut these to length, but they're going to go on just like that. Let's see, we'll leave the natural curve of the hose going down. We'll go there like that. And when our control valve activates them, one will go. Oh, come on now. Come on. Well, come on now. What's the deal here? Everything looks as it should. Okay, let me hook it up to the control body and see what's going on. Alright, well, more often than not, you guys are following me in real time, so it wouldn't really be fair of me to entirely just cut out the bad stuff. And we just showed me trying to assemble that, and it didn't work. So it's the next morning now. And after I've thought about it, I kind of came to this conclusion last night. The only thing that I can think of that is wrong is the gasket that goes in between. I said you wanted it on the air valve itself, on the control valve. I'm thinking maybe not. I'm thinking maybe it has to be, I think they both need to be gasketed. But I'm going to put the factory gasket back on the base of the impact body itself and reassemble it and see if that makes a difference. That's the only thing I can think of that is not really right or exactly the same. And the other valve body, I had it set up like this. So that may be the only difference right there. This may offer a little more restriction to divert the air the way it needs to go, or maybe not. You know, we'll put it back together and we'll see what happens here. So I would hate to think that after all of this foolishness, I've got a failed operation here. And I don't believe I do. You know, it's possible I may have a bad impact gun or something that way, but I don't think we've got anything that's not able to be overcome with a little bit of adjustment and ingenuity here. Well, I put this back together, and I'm still not acting like it's supposed to, I don't think. I just put our gasket underneath here, so I'm probably going to, since I have another one, I'm probably going to put the other impact body on here and see if that makes a difference. You know, I may have a bad gun. It was, you know, I thought it ran fine when I first tried it out, but and maybe when I soldered my joints in, I overheated it, something like that. So I may have to replace the gun itself. I'm going to go ahead, like I say, I'm going to swap out with what I've got, and we'll see if that makes a difference, because everything else looks good to me. Well, this is my old impact chuck on here, or impact gun on here, and it acts like it's supposed to. So I think I just got a bad gun, is what I think it is. So. So I think that's all it is. It is just a bad gun, and that's part of the good and the bad. You know, you pays your money, you takes your chances. You know, I said at the very beginning I wasn't real impressed with these little impact guns, and this one's no exception. I mean, it's just, they're an inexpensive piece of kind of stuff for 15 bucks. What do you really expect? So anyway, I'll wait until after the holidays, and we'll go and run down and pick up another one. You know, spend another 15 bucks. It's not, if I get a good finished product when I'm done, well, I'm not too concerned about it. I am going to go ahead and assemble it and test it and set it up on the mill with this impact gun. And if everything works fine, then, well, I'll probably leave it just on this one, and then when I set up the other one, well, I'll go ahead and rework it with another gun. So anyway, let's go ahead. I'll finish assembling it, and we'll go ahead and get it installed and see how it's going to run. Finally getting someplace here. Let me bring you down. I haven't mounted it on the mill yet, but we've got things adjusted, and I think gonna run the way they're supposed to. I've done several things now. I'm using all of the controls off of the other drawbar. I've got all of the impact gun controls. I've got the valve body here. I've set it to my back plate and my button here, and I've got the rest of the impact gun on the body, because I think I do have a bad impact gun, was part of my problem. Now, I've done a couple other changes too. Spring tension. Those springs were way too much. Let me bring this down here. I'm using the springs off of the other drawbar, and I'm using the collars. So I've adjusted tension, and actually they're tensioned differently. I've got this one a little bit higher than this side, but I've got no binding in them. So the way it's going to work, why, when we run the controls, why, does just like that both directions. So everything that I've changed out and had problems with has been, with the exception of the springs, has been in relation to that other impact gun. So whether it was a bad impact gun to start with, or if I damaged it with all my monkeying around with it, one of the two, I don't know. Like I said before, I'll go after the holidays and pick up a new impact gun. And I'll probably just set it up on the other drawbar, you know, and I'll give you an update. We won't go through all this crap, because I'm going to use the same controls that I had before, although I'll clean up that drawbar a little bit. It's a little bit crude. Now, spring-wise, it looks to me like you can probably take one of the springs, and I think this was a number 62 was the number I'd given. I think it looks like I'd shortened up these springs. It looks like you can take one of these springs and cut it in half. We'll give you the proper tension, or within the range of what it needs to be doing, because this one's working super smooth. You know, if we sit back and wait until I get the other drawbar built, why, then we can verify that that's actually the proper springs, but I believe it is. So I'll take this and we'll set it up on the mill and get everything plumbed back in, and then we'll make sure it's going to work. Okay, I promised you the bad as well as the good. Well, now we're back to the good. So everything's mounted. The drawbar portion is. There's still a few little things I have to take care of, but I don't have parts for them. I still need to do a street L down here under the controls, and I'll bring that up so we can get a better look at it. Anyway, here's the unit on top, and in operation, there pulls out our little Tormek tool setup, back in, and there we go. So, works fine. I think it's going to be fine. I'll have to play with it a little bit, find out what tension we've got. So, there again, I've got the old unit back on there, adjusted spring tension, and I've already cut springs for the other one back in again, because these are the springs I robbed off the other unit. It is that, I believe it's a number 62 spring, whatever I'd said previously in the video, and I just cut those in half, and that's the proper length for these. Let me bring this down a little bit now. We've seen it working in top. So I've done those. The poly tube is just run down around the back of the head. I haven't secured it on the back. I probably will at some point, although it clears everything and there's no tension on it. And our mount, let's bring this head up a little bit. Our mount is from our two holes here. Our poly line runs over our tensioner that's on the mill. And I'll double check those lines as time goes on, but everything looks fine with them. I'm not overly concerned with anything there. And so that's the way it works underneath. Collet comes out, back in, tighten her up, and we're secure. And that, there again, I'll have to make sure that we're secure and stay secure, you know, check tension on those periodically and find out if it's gonna hold, you know, better than trying to manually tighten it like we did, which I'm sure it is. Now the downside, the fancy little regulator that I was so proud of seems to be leaking a little bit, and I was just running the plastic fittings that were on it and trying to get it set up. With it cranked all the way up, it looks like it leaks a little bit of air, and it doesn't produce enough air through to run the drawbar. It may just need to be adjusted, may need to be cleaned, may need something. I'll pull it apart and look at it. But I've got straight air run to it right now, and that's a temporary situation. I want to run it through a regulator with an oiler on it and that type of thing. So while I really like the looks of this one, it may or may not do what I want it to do. It's going to have plenty of applications in the shop one way or the other. There's several little things that could function just fine with that setup, so I'm still not unhappy with that regulator, but it may not be the one to run the drawbar off of. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm going to leave it for right now. You know, it's up, it's working now, and that was my main concern here. Yesterday I was a little bit discouraged by it because things weren't wanting to go as they should, but now it's all lined itself out, everything's fine. I believe it does need a gasket underneath the control body, between the body and the backing plate, and there was a gasket. I had built a gasket for underneath the original drawbar, so now that gasket is underneath there too. So there's the factory gasket up on the bottom of the impact portion of it, and then I built a gasket for underneath the control body. So that's where we're at. You know, hopefully you found this a little bit interesting as you've gone through my trials and tribulations with this. I knew where I wanted to go with it, but it didn't go quite as I had hoped it would. I thought this was going to be a quick and easy, simple one. I'm really happy with it. You know, the installation I think is pretty clean looking. Airlines are run out of the way, and I'm very happy with all of that. I'll still have to finish the plumbing from here over to a regulator over to my little tool tower. But anyway, that's where we're at. So hopefully you found it a little bit interesting, a little bit entertaining watching my comedic errors there. And any comments or suggestions, leave them in the comments section for me below. Here it's almost midday on December 24th. So all of you folks have a Merry Christmas. And yes, we say Merry Christmas around here. And Happy New Year. And thanks for taking the time to watch. Only a little cold and snowy out here this morning. It's the day after Christmas, and I hope you all had a Merry Christmas. We are going to add one more part to this series, I think, and hopefully we'll have been able to wrap this up. I said that I was going to leave this for now. Well, I think I've kind of figured out my problem. I'm not sure it was the gun at all. I think it's my valving or my porting that I put in. And I think what's happened is I said we needed that hole through the back to let that air to escape. And I think what's happened is that we're allowing too much air to escape. The other impact gun that I said I thought was just a bad gun, and I mounted it on the other valve body, and it acts like it's working quite a bit better. So I think it's my setup and just allowing too much gas to escape. So I'm going to go back, revisit that, and then I'll show you what we came up with at the end to make it, because I know you guys have followed along, and I appreciate that. But it doesn't do any good for me to do something and then not really show how we troubleshoot it or what went wrong with it. So we'll do one more thing on it, assuming we get this to work right, and we'll go from there. So as always, thanks for taking the time to watch.